very quickly. Just like if you were observing the game of tennis, if you're observing it, you start to say, boy, they hit that ball to the left an awful lot. You know, you can actually start to then learn. And once you know it's a game and not what you perceived it was all along, which is some relationship of some sort, be it a business partnership or a love relationship. I mean, these kinds of manipulative situations are so prevalent in our society right now.
It's how our society works.
Yes, and in order for you not to fall victim, you at least have to acknowledge that this type of manipulation exists. And then you start to raise your consciousness, raise your awareness. You start to have the ability to understand. And if you're in these types, and you might have had a similar experience, if you're in these types of relationships, when you first wake up and realize it, you kind of want to gather people around to help you, and they often don't buy in. And you have to accept that. That's all part of being your own authority, because only you truly know the conditions of your life. Nobody really knows what's happening behind those closed doors. And if you are waiting to get that validation from somebody else in order to take action, that moment may never come.
Let me ask you a question. If you have a person you're dealing with and there's physical abuse involved in the relationship, and the person comes to realize, comes to accept, wants to take control, is doing the observing, do you give them tools on, you know, because eventually the abuser is going to figure out that something's different and is going to become probably violent to try to get back what he wants.
That's right.
And what kinds of tools do you offer to
thank you.
like that?
I don't like to use labels, but if I were to use labels, some of these manipulators fall into categories of sociopathy, narcissism, or psychopathy. That's when you're getting into very dangerous situations. But most people think, think of those people as if they're, people you would recognize when you saw them, and that's not true.
Characters in a book.
Yes, they're not characters in a book. There's people living with them right now, and they don't even know it. The person who is falling victim excuses away their behavior and does not adopt that. So when you wake up, it's really very terrifying.
Yes. To
all of a sudden realize, oh my gosh, what do I do? Now, most of the people that I help are not physically being, battered. They're being manipulated and controlled, and that's what a sociopath is famous for: is manipulation and control. Watching where you're going, reading all your emails, getting information from your phone, and they're going to be dangerous at some level, depending upon the circumstances and who they are. So there are methodologies that you can use to try and temper that stuff so that you can get out safely. And so the tools have a lot to do with your own response patterns. For example, as people that have been in those kinds of environments, we tend to over-explain ourselves. So we're accustomed to being held accountable. This may seem like really silly advice, but you may say, well, it works. One thing is to start being more Columbo-like. Do you remember the show Columbo?
Oh, yes.
Yes. He wasn't very articulate, which most people who fall victim to these types of manipulations are very articulate, highly self-confident people.
The more you say, the more information you give them.
You're loading their gun. So you just say, oh, I don't really remember if I took care of that. You become much more vague. Now, that will make them off balance, but off balance is better than full-blown. And so violent. So while they're off balance, we're strategizing to get you out. So it's about finding, as I said, going through that change wall, finding new ways to be. Many times you're being manipulated out of your assets or out of your, there's so many potentials here. But in those instances, each situation is unique. I didn't mention this, but now would be a good time to mention it. My career was in financial services. So I have 30 years in financial services, and I started at the bottom of the company and I worked my way up. And so I have a lot of experience on financial assets, how to divide them, what the ownership means, how that's going to work, and that becomes very handy. That's why I feel I was born for this, It's like I've been in training my whole life. I mean, my whole life, to bring me to this moment where I believe I am uniquely prepared or uniquely qualified to help people, not just through the emotions of waking up and moving through these kinds of relationships, but also through the actual doing it. Now, I always say I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a medical professional, but I have a vast
Resources.
experience and
you
resources.
have resources. And it must be really wonderful to have spent your life in these various positions and then to come to this point in time where it all has gelled and you have a really important message.
Yes.
And I like to say, because mostly we talk about abusive husbands and whatnot, there are abusive wives.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of men who are in relationships where they are taken advantage of as well.
Yes, and in fact, for them, it's even harder to come forward because it has a little extra.
The macho thing.
I was, manipulated, controlled, and abused by a woman. That's just like, it feels like another setup to get more abuse. And so you're absolutely right, and I make that distinction that obviously being a woman, my situation was largely with men, but I do help men that are in this situation with women. And some of the testimonies on my book you'll see are from men, or on my webpage about the work that I do are from men. So that's very important, and they do have a little extra. They have to have a little extra release of their ego to come forward and say, this happened to me.
We tend to go, when we talk about these situations, we tend to go to the extremes, but there are really various levels, I
Yes.
think, of abuse.
That's right.
And happening. And for instance, one of the things that is in the news so often now is equal pay for women, and how do women navigate through this very intricate world of getting a man who's in charge to pay her the same that he, I mean, this story about the New York Times lady who found out that she made less than her assistant.
Right.
It's pretty, unbelievable. I think you should talk to that woman.
Yes.
We have about a minute and a half left, so I would like you to really kind of sum up your message, and what advice would you give to your readers? Like, what's the first thing you want them to do? What's the best piece of advice you could give them?
Thank you. And the point that you just made, which was very clarifying, is you don't have to think of what my book is about or what we're talking about as just all knocked down, dragged down things. Our life can have subtleties in it, things that are happening to us every day, and it kind of comes back to the core of what you said earlier. Your beliefs are running your life. The beliefs that you probably adopted when you were 7 years old or in that vicinity. And you have allowed many things to be your authority. The audience for my book, although sociopathy is a big emphasis on it, is really anyone who wants to become their own authority, to no longer be at the bottom of their own totem pole, including the work and career totem pole, that wants to express and learn their own value. I went to do this like kind of hugging yourself, like suddenly realizing your worth. And it also gives techniques like sentences to say, words to use, and encourages you to journal out a lot of emotions that you're going to come across as you finally look within. And so the second half is very instructional with exercises and so on, and it's about you finding the power within yourself to stand up and live in accordance with what you know is your truth.
Excellent.
Thank you.
That was really a great discussion.
Thanks
Thanks
so
so much.
much.